very important that the new governance of Syria is working in a rather inclusive way, including all the communities that make up the society of the country. And that includes Christians, for example, but it also includes Kurds. We explicitly state that in all kinds of statements, and it has also been included in the first EU statement right after the fall of Assad.
Minister, on Georgia, we saw many statements from your ministry. What's your now current opinion? Because, as you know, my colleague, for example, independent journalist Zia Maglobeli on a hunger strike, 15th day. Former Prime Minister was brutally attacked. People almost 60 days in the streets, and we saw just like the suspension visa facilities for diplomatic passports. So can we expect some real measures, and what's your country's position regarding sanctioning those people who are responsible for these actions?
The Netherlands has always been for personal sanctions for those responsible for the repression. At this moment, the step to take is withdrawing the visa freedom for Georgian diplomatic passport holders. I think that's an important first step. On journalists and the freedom of journalists, I'm very concerned, and that's also why the Netherlands made available extra resources for the protection of journalists. We also made available extra resources for those who have been arrested in the repression of free demonstrations. We stand with those who want to work on the European path for Georgia, and that horizon stands, and we are rather critical regarding the elections that have taken place, also in light of the ODA report.
Sorry, one question for the US-EU relations. We talked about US-EU relations today as well. I mean, Trump talked about clearing out Gaza over the weekend. What is your position on this? And I mean, can there be any good relations with a partner like this?
I believe that we can have good relations with the US, like we had in during the first Trump administration. So it's important to constructively engage as Europe and as European countries with the US administration. Regarding the Gaza Strip, it's very important that the ceasefire holds. For that, we need two parties, Israel and Hamas, to work constructively also towards the second phase. That will not be easy. That is very important because with the ceasefire, we can see the release of all the hostages, which is important. We can also see, safeguard that more humanitarian aid will come in and really be distributed to those in need. And hopefully this ceasefire also brings an end to the war. That is very important. I would not speculate about ideas of the people, of the Palestinian people of the Gaza Strip to go anywhere else. Those who are the Palestinians in the Palestinian territories should be able to remain in the Palestinian territories, be it the West Bank or the Gaza Strip.
We have to go now. Last question.
Not go into panic mode on Trump. What's your idea on this?
We see
panic mode is never good in foreign policy making. It's never good. It's never a good base of foreign policy making. There's no reason to be in panic mode. We are not in panic mode. What is very important is that we chart our way in a constructive engagement, because the relations between Europe and the US are very intensive, both on the economic front as well as regarding security and defense policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Foreign Affairs Council will discuss about hybrid threats today. EU Commission is taking hybrid threats very seriously, such a recent one in the Baltic Sea, and I want to comment Latvian and Swedish authorities for their very quick action. Protection of critical infrastructure and also investigation of the incidents is responsibility of the Member States, but the Commission is willing and capable to support Member States. Our tools, they include operational support, financial support, and also information sharing. We are currently investing to new technologies and also very close cooperation with Member States, with the industry, who often owns the cables, and of course NATO. It's crucial to be able to better prevent, detect, respond, and also repair our infrastructure. I think the authorities now in Latvia and Sweden, they were taking very, I think, swift action. And also during the Christmas time, we saw the same in Finland. So I think now we are better prepared already in the member states. And of course, it's always crucial that all the authorities, they are sharing the information, and then it's easier also to respond to these actions.
Are you worried about further attacks? What's your stance on the future of the hybrid threats?
We have to be prepared for very different hybrid threats as we have seen. So we are really living in times when everything can be weaponized, and now we have to take more actions to really prevent our critical infrastructures. Luckily, we have many technologies we can use there, but also we have to work very closely with the member states and with NATO. And often the owner of the infrastructure is a private industries. Of course, their role is also very important here.
You say we're better prepared, but then we keep on hearing on these incidences when cables are destroyed and other infrastructure is destroyed. So are we really better prepared?
I think we are already, because now we have seen, because this was, I think, 5th or 6th on the row in the Baltic Sea, that kind of incident. So now these two last ones in Finland, between Finland and Estonia during the Christmas time, and this weekend between Latvia and Sweden, the authorities, they have been responding very swift, and they have been taking the action. So I think we are much better prepared, but of course we have to do more.
But one thing is responding, but how can we prevent this?
We are currently investing to new technologies where we can use cables, smart cables as sensors, and also we can use our satellites. And of course we know also that NATO is currently having also operation on Baltic Sea. So we are working on that, how to be better prepared also to prevent our infrastructure. Thank you.
Minister, I have one question concerning Syria and Europe trying to contain the
Good to see you. Good to see you. Can I say a few words maybe? I'm very conscious that there's many people in Ireland still without electricity supply and without water, and I want to assure people that everything that can be done is being done to restore people to supply as quickly as possible. I really want to express my gratitude to the incredible crews who are doing so much work right across the country. We've gone from around over 750,000 people not having access to electricity to over 200,000 people now. But I am conscious as this goes on, the longer it goes on, the more hardship that imposes on people, and that's why we're carrying out a number of activities. As Minister for Defence, I'm very pleased to see the Air Corps has been assisting the ESB networks and continues to be available for any requests where we can help in a practical sense. I'm also very grateful to the Civil Defence, who have been carrying out a number of activities, particularly in the north and northwest of the country, and that support, both from the Air Corps, the Defence Forces and the Civil Defence, will of course continue in the days ahead. We're also very eager now to see these local authority emergency response hubs established. A number are now open, more will open, and our national coordination team will meet today at 12 o'clock to see what more can be done. I'm very pleased to be here at my first meeting of the Foreign Affairs Council. Of course, we're meeting at a time of much geopolitical uncertainty and challenge. I firstly want to obviously acknowledge and very much recognise that today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and it is so important and so vital that we pause and that we remember the absolute horror. How many people were murdered during this time? 6 million people, and today I will be announcing additional funding from Ireland for the Auschwitz-Birkenau Foundation as well, to continue to support the preservation of that site. We must never forget, and we must all say never again, and Ireland is very determined to continue to work to stamp out anti-Semitism in every way we can, both domestically and indeed at a European level. We have much on the agenda today. Obviously the Ukraine, a very serious situation continues there. We must absolutely maintain European solidarity. We need to see the rollover of the sanctions in relation to Russia. That's absolutely essential, and I think very good progress has been made on that this morning, and I welcome that fact. We need to obviously discuss the Middle East. I think we need to begin to progress the conversation about the status of the sanctions in relation to Syria, but any changes there, I think, will need to have a snapback mechanism. I think that's really important to provide the European Union with the assurances that we require. And of course, in relation to Gaza, very much welcome the fact that the ceasefire is holding so far, that we have seen the release of hostages, and that we are seeing a very significant increase in humanitarian aid, but we need to see so much more. And I think we need to all challenge ourselves on how we can do more. While I'm here today, I'll also have an opportunity to have a bilateral with the EU Trade Commissioner, someone who knows Ireland very well from the Brexit days, but wanted to have a very early engagement with him. I think it's absolutely vital that the European Union and the United States establish a deep, meaningful working relationship. The United States is reliant on foreign direct investment. It was before the US presidential election. It is after the US presidential election, and the US and the EU are dependent on each other both before and after the presidential election. And now that President Trump is in office, it's really, really important that we engage intensively on trade and how we can do business together. And I welcome that we'll have a chance to talk about that as ministers today, but also that I'll have a bilateral with the Trade Commissioner.
On the question of the Holocaust, do you think it was appropriate for President Higgins to talk about Gaza during his speech on the Auschwitz remembrance yesterday, given the sensitivities about linkage and equivalence to various historic events?
So I think it was important that the President of Ireland attended the event yesterday. I think it's the 7th time he has attended an event, and this is always an event carried out with great solemnity and sensitivity. I believe yesterday's event was a very moving occasion, obviously for survivors and their families most particularly, and Minister Donoghue was there on behalf of the government. I understand there were a small number of people who protested, and of course people have a right to protest, but I think the President was very clear, as is the government, as are the people of Ireland, in calling out the horrors of the Holocaust and making sure we remember that we record that we acknowledge that each year, and of course people have a right to protest.
But was it appropriate for Gaza to be linked to the Holocaust or mentioned in the same speech?
I think the President was very clear in relation to obviously specific issues regarding the Holocaust and his absolute condemnation of the horror, the murder of the Jewish people, but also I think rightly mentioning the situation in the Middle East as well, but also calling very much for hostages to be released. I am conscious though that this is a very, very sensitive time, and I don't want to say anything to distract from that. You know, today is the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. Today is International Holocaust Memorial Day, and I think it's really important that we keep the focus on that.
What about Syria? And I wanted to find out
Department of Foreign Affairs.
I'm not sure.
Minister,
I wanted to find out what you intend to do precisely in Syria, the situation going there right now.
So I think in Syria, I think it's early days, but I think there are cautious signs of optimism. But it is important that we continue to engage. I don't think it would be a good scenario to have many other geopolitical actors and forces engaging with Syria, and for the European Union not to be in a position to intensively engage. And I welcome the fact that a number of my counterparts have already visited Syria. A number more will in the days ahead. I think that is good. I think we're getting to the point where we can begin to have an informed conversation around the issue of sanctions. But I think it is vital that any discussion around that also has that snapback mechanism, so that if things do go off kilter, there is an ability to immediately reinstate the sanctions. I think that's a prudent way to respond. That's the starting point to which I come to this conversation. I think we also, in the time ahead, need to consider obviously issues around migration and the many Syrians who fled Syria right across Europe, but I think that is for another day. I think the priority now must be on engagement with the new Syrian authorities and making sure that as we consider the easing of sanctions, that there is that snapback mechanism.
About Donald Trump's call for what he called the clear out of Gaza. I mean, given how strongly Egypt and Jordan have resisted the idea of pushing Palestinians into the Sinai or even into Jordan from the West Bank, how concerned are you about those comments?
So firstly, I'd say President Trump, I suppose, and his team were very much a party to the ceasefire agreement in terms of very intensive work, and I acknowledge that, the very intensive work that the Trump administration put in the days before President Trump assumed office. I think that was welcome, and I've no doubt that played a very significant role in helping to bring about a ceasefire that has now seen the killing and the bombing stop, that has seen the aid flow, and has seen hostages be released. And it's really important that ceasefire holds. It is also important, though, to acknowledge in that ceasefire agreement itself it does talk about people being able to return. And therefore, I think it's important that we're consistent in the approach that we take. The priority, I think, needs to be on implementing the letter and the spirit of the ceasefire. And like I say, President Trump's administration has played a positive role in bringing about those conditions. I think our focus now has to be on making sure that it lasts, that it holds, that it is enduring, and that it can be built upon. I must say, I was so pleased, as I'm so many people across the world were, to see aid trucks finally re-entering, to see aid being distributed. But the scale of what has to happen here is absolutely almost incomprehensible, and I think it's really important that we continue to look at every opportunity to increase humanitarian aid.
One more. Link to what you have to say about the EU-US relations after the inaugural speech on Monday?
So President Trump is a democratically elected president of the United States of America. He will decide the direction of his country for the next 4 years, and certainly for the next period of time. His party controls both houses of Congress as well, and that is the reality with which the European Union finds itself. I think Europe should not just become a multilateral organisation that talks about President Trump. We should also be one that talks about what we are going to do ourselves. We are not just commentators on the outcomes of other people's elections. We are the European Union, and there are hundreds of millions of us. There are 27 countries, and we must now control what we can control. And that means the implementation of the Draghi report. It means the implementation of Letta's recommendations. It means carving out the proper time, bandwidth, space, capacity in the Commission to return to issues like competitiveness. And it means engaging with President Trump in a way that I think he relates to, about the benefits to the United States of America of doing business with the European Union and member states of the European Union. And I would respectfully point out, when you look at trade in the round and when you include the issue of services, it's a much more it's a very different or less stark picture to perhaps how it's somehow presented in the United States. So we can do business with the Trump administration. My country has done business with every US administration. There'll be challenges. There'll absolutely be challenges. But we've got to control what we can control, and that's why I want to meet the Trade Commissioner today. I think it's essential that there's an early engagement between the EU and the US. I called for that during my time as a member of the European Council. I reiterate that today. And I also very much welcome the fact that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, will be invited to participate or to either Zoom in or meet us in person at a Foreign Affairs Council at an early date. I think that would be really a very welcome development.
With meeting members of the US pharma sector, multinational sector, as part of perhaps a charm offensive to dissuade them from shifting production to the US?
So we'll absolutely be engaging with them, and it's my intention in the next week or so to bring proposals to government to establish a new trade consultative forum. What I want to do here is get people around the table. I want to get people around the table in the broadest sense of the words Team Ireland. Whether you're the government of Ireland, whether you're people investing in Ireland, whether you're people looking to seek investment in Ireland, I think it's really important we all work together and trade. It's really important we also listen carefully to what people considering investing in Ireland are saying to us. And they're saying we need to see a greater investment in infrastructure, in things like water, energy and housing. And I think showing them that we have a roadmap and a plan forward there, as we do and as we've prioritised in the programme for government talks, would be very good. There's many, many reasons people do business in Ireland, and I don't believe those reasons have fundamentally changed at all. And I do believe working together, actually, we can further enhance the Why Ireland argument in the days, weeks and months ahead. Well, obviously the European Union has a wide range of sanctions in place in relation to Syria, and I think as we begin to consider in the time ahead the future of those sanctions, obviously we have to be very conscious of the very important issues that you highlight. And human rights is a fundamental value on which the European Union is founded. I think it is also, though, important that the European Union doesn't remove itself in any way from engagement. I think we've seen how that has been a mistake in other parts of the world in the time gone by, where many others engage with countries and the European Union stands back. I don't think that would be a prudent or responsible thing to do. I think it's much better to engage, but of course engage based on our own values, and of course having snapback mechanisms in place if we make any decisions in relation to the removal of sanctions or the easing of sanctions in due course. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
polskich dziennikarzy. Musimy tam popatrzeć.
Dziękuję. Sorry. Dzień dobry Państwu. Dzisiaj pierwsza Rada Ministrów Rolnictwa Unii Europejskiej w czasie naszej prezydencji, polskiej prezydencji. To duże wyzwanie, ale także wszelkiego rodzaju możliwości kierowania, wpływania, koordynacji, współpracy, wypracowywania pozycji Polski tutaj w Unii Europejskiej. Główne przesłania, wokół których będziemy skupiać dzisiejszą naszą dyskusję, ale nie tylko, to jest problem bezpieczeństwa żywnościowego. O tym dużo mówił także pan premier Tusk w czasie swojej wizyty w parlamencie w Strasburgu. Drugi obszar spraw to jest problem związany z uproszczeniem wspólnej polityki rolnej, temat ciągle aktualny, ciągle ważny i ciągle oczekiwany przez rolników. Trzeci temat to poprawa funkcjonowania rolników w łańcuchu żywnościowym, bo rolnicy w tym łańcuchu żywnościowym od pola do stołu są najsłabszym ogniwem, nie mają wpływu na ceny środków produkcji, nie mają wpływu na ceny sprzedaży, czy mają ograniczony wpływ, stąd tak ważna jest pozycja rolników, co też o co się bardzo mocno dopominali w czasie protestów, które rozpoczęły się na początku, jeszcze w 2023 roku, ale głównie ich nasilenie przypadło w roku 2024. I tymi sprawami będziemy się zajmować w czasie dzisiejszego posiedzenia Rady i w takim ujęciu bieżącym legislacyjnym, bo będziemy omawiać dwa wnioski rozporządzeń, które złożyła Komisja dotyczące wspólnej organizacji rynku, gdzie chodzi nam o wzmocnienie pozycji właśnie rolników w tym łańcuchu i także o transgraniczne wszystkie sprawy związane z ograniczeniem nieuczciwych praktyk handlowych, co jest wyjątkowo ważne. Także będziemy się zajmować sprawami związanymi z ochroną zwierząt, głównie w transporcie, ale także dobrostanem psów, kotów, identyfikacji tych zwierząt. Także będziemy podejmować tematy bardzo ważne, jak związane z handlem, który jest istotnym obszarem i zainteresowania rolników, ale także ostatnie wydarzenia, czy sprawy związane z umową z Mercosurem, czy w ogóle cały spraw handlu, one nabierają wyjątkowego znaczenia. Oczywiście tutaj zawsze pamiętamy, że handel to obowiązuje, to jest zasada w obie strony, że nie tylko kupujemy, ale także sprzedajemy. Należy o tym pamiętać, ale także będą wyjątkowo ważne sprawy, jeśli chodzi o handel, to my tutaj bardzo mocno wyraźnie stawiamy i mówimy do Komisji o potrzebie takiej pełnej analizy udzielonej